So, hi everyone, it's lovely to meet you all virtually. This is the workshop, University Sustainability and Student Leadership. My name's Katie. I'm a Student Climate Commissioner and Guild HE representative, and I'm also a PhD student at Plymouth Marjon University. And together with my lovely colleague Matt, we'll be leading the workshop. Matt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Matt Woodthorpe. I'm the Climate Commission Manager. So I'll explain a little bit what that is. But I'm also the EAUC Scotland Programme Manager as well. And before this role, I worked in a students' union for 3 years. So it's great to be able to join today and work again with students on sustainability issues.
Fabulous. So, if we go on to are you all right doing the slides, Matt?
Yep, no problem. So next one up here.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so during this workshop, I'll just quickly go over the aims so we all know what to expect. So we're going to introduce the EAUC and the Climate Commission, and we're really going to be looking at why people, planet and prosperity is not just important, but absolutely essential. We're going to provide an understanding of business ambitions and challenges, and most importantly, we want to hear your thoughts and experiences of sustainability engagement within your institution. So there'll be an opportunity later on when we'll go into breakout sessions and we can really start to have those discussions in much more detail and kind of share our own experiences, but also look at what we can do going forward to help our institutions make positive change. And hopefully by the end of this, we will have provided a lot of inspiration and lots of ideas of what we could do going forward. So I thought it would be really good to start off with who are the Climate Commission. So the Climate Commission was launched in November 2019 in response to the government's Climate and Environment Emergency Declaration. It aims to coordinate a clear response to a climate emergency for both further and higher education. And it really does this by working with universities and colleges to tackle the climate crisis and to have a strong voice nationally and internationally in addressing the climate crisis. It is a partnership. It's made up of 4 organisations. So that's the Association of Colleges, Universities UK, Guild HE and EAUC. And I'm sure some of you have heard of a couple of them before. So the Climate Commission really has 3 main targets. They are there. I won't go through them in detail, but they're there for you to have a look. But the overall target is really that colleges and universities meet net zero greenhouse gas emissions by no later than 2050. So when we're talking about net zero greenhouse gas emissions, this is about achieving an overall balance between greenhouse gas emissions that we produce and the greenhouse emissions that we take out of the atmosphere.
Thank you, Katie. And I'll give a little update on who EAUC are. So we're a charity that works with all colleges and universities in the UK. And really, with our vision and what we do is to put sustainability at the heart of our education within our institutions. So it's just making sustainability good business sense. And that's in its broadest sense possible. So that's, for example, supporting institutions with setting and implementing net zero targets through to looking to how to embed sustainability in the curriculum, in teaching research, for example, as well as looking at other wider social issues such as period poverty as well. We really recognise that UK and Irish education can be really a global leader in sustainability in terms of education. So we're there to support institutions. In terms of how we support students, really welcome for you to get on board. So in Scotland, where I'm usually based, all institutions can engage with us, and so can students. In England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Ireland, most of universities are a member of us, so do just get in touch if you have any questions, if you want any data, for example, on institutions, or if you have a project idea, get in touch, because more often than not, your institution is actually a member and we can therefore support you. That'd be useful. So what I'm going to do, hopefully I'm going to stop sharing in a second, and we're going to introduce a bit about people, planet, prosperity, and the urgency of taking action now. But before we do that, we've got a quick poll. It'd be great for you if you could do. So I'm going to launch it. It's a series of questions. So the first one, or the first 2 would be, before today, have you heard of the Climate Commission at EAUC before? So it'd be great to hear about your responses. And then we'll go through some of the context around climate change. So we have, I believe, 6 questions there. So if you want to go through and spend a minute or so going through, we'll see what comes up. So in addition to hearing whether you've heard about climate question EAUC before, we have question 3, which is globally, so far we have experienced around blank degrees of warming. Do you think it's 0.7, 0.9, 1.1, or 1.3 degrees? Question 4 is, the Paris Agreement aims to keep the rise in global temperatures well below how much degrees and to pursue efforts to limit it to blank degrees. Do we think that's 2 or 1 degrees, 2 and 1.5, 3 and 2, or 2.5 and 2? Following on from that, there's a question. So to have a reasonable chance of achieving this Paris Agreement target, global emissions would need to reach net zero by what amount? By when? Sorry, 2040, 2045, 2050, and 2055. And then the last question is, based on current government strategies and policies around the world at this stage, what is the forecast level of global warming by 2100? Is that 1 to 2 degrees, 2 to 3 degrees, 3 to 4, or 4 degrees plus? And as a clue for the last one, it's changed slightly in response to COVID, which is a more positive step, which is good to see.
Some really interesting answers coming out already on here, Matt. Some very varied opinions on what it could be. So I'm interested to see what the answers are going to be, because I want to know.
Yeah, and I mean, it's always good to know. So as I say, like particularly that last one with COVID, these change. So you know, as a citizen, it's good to re-inform yourself of these different things because it's not static.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think 80%, 84% voted. So maybe just 30 more seconds, and we'll close that and see what we've got.
Great to see so many of you on the call already today, guys. Thank you for joining us. This is a very exciting session that we hope to do more of as well throughout the year. So please do let us know your feedback at the end and how you get on with it today.
Okay, so I'm going to end the poll there and share the results. So hopefully you'll be able to see those. So great to hear almost over half have heard of the Climate Commission. And you've also kept me in a job that you haven't heard of EAUC before. So I've got to take that back, and if we can do a bit more promoting, which is fantastic. So thank you for that. It's really useful, but really important with the Climate Commission's work that you're hearing that. It's really strong. So going through the questions. So globally so far, we've experienced around how many degrees of warming? Most people got this right. So 39% said 1.1 degrees. That's correct. So that's the global average warming we've experienced. But it does vary depending on where you are in the world. So in the UK, we've experienced around 1.2 degrees. And if you move towards the polar regions, it increases because a lot more heat is retained there. So if you're looking at Western Canada, which is having a heat wave at the moment, I think it's like 46 degrees is a new record for out there. And Alaska, it's actually warm between 3 and 4 degrees over the same period. So it does vary in the where you are, but 1.1 is where we're at the moment. For the Paris Agreement, again, just over half you got this right. So we want to keep global temperatures well below 2 degrees and to pursue efforts to limit this to 1.5 degrees, which I think when I'm looking back at it, this was set up in 2015, that target, it seemed quite far off. But then when we put it in the context of we've already experienced 1.1 degrees of warming, we've actually got a smaller window than we might think. So only 0.4 to get to that, try and limit to 1.5. So question 5, to have a reasonable chance of achieving this, global emissions would need to reach net zero by what date? And the answer is 2050. So what's interesting here, this is on a global scale. If we look at the UK's target, that is also 2050. In Scotland, it's a bit different, it's 2045. But is that fair? So historically, UK is ranked 5th as the biggest contributor to climate change, starting from the Industrial Revolution through to today. Yet our target is just what is needed. So really, we should be making faster cuts in our emissions to allow less developed countries a bit more time to reach net zero. So they might have to reach net zero by 2055, 2060. And this is a really central piece of what we call climate justice. Those who contribute or have contributed least to climate change are often most at risk of the effects of climate change. And then lastly, based on current government strategies and policies around the world, what is the forecast level of global warming? So this is quite a split between all three. And the answer is 2 to 3 degrees. So it's about 2.9 at the moment. So it's a bit better than we might expect. But that has been a big shift this last year due to COVID and a lot more Build Back Better policies. So 12 months ago, if you had the same question, you'd probably be looking at, well, you would be looking at 3 to 4 degrees. And we'll look at the impacts of these temperature changes in a second. But hopefully that's, I'll stop sharing there. But hopefully that's just it's a good thing to give a bit of context on a global picture of climate change. So I will just start sharing the PowerPoint again. So I really want to touch on what are the differences between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees, because in many senses they're numbers and there's not much difference between them. I really recommend when you're developing your Enactus business cases, for example, or other projects, to use resources like this and consider how you might frame them for your good or your product or your service that you're going to be providing. So the IPCC in 2018 released a report looking at global warming impacts of 1.5 degrees and compared them to the impacts of 2 degrees. And what we see is that the risks and impacts are significantly higher at 2 degrees compared to 1.5 degrees. And I provide this graph just to illustrate some of the different environments and impacts. So what we find is, you might have heard in the news, like coral reefs at the moment suffering from bleaching due to warming sea temperatures, that's acidifying the water. At 1.5 degrees, which is where we're hoping to get to, actually we've lost 90% of coral reefs already. If we get to 2 degrees, we've almost lost 100%. We find Arctic regions are also more susceptible than other ecosystems because the heat of the world dissipates to those regions. We start seeing more coastal flooding, for example. It's high risk at 1.5, but it's becoming very high at 2. So this is on a global scale, but you can use this data in proposals. And when we look at it in a UK context, so this is from the Committee on Climate Change 2020, and it's using Met Office data. It's a big table, but I focus on these bottom 3 rows. And it says, what's happened so far? Well, since 1900, we've had about 16 centimeters of sea level rise. It's not clear that we can indicate increasing heavy rain events due to climate change at this stage, but we do recognize that there's a 10 to 25% chance each year of a heat wave, similar to 2018 summer. Well, a few decades ago, that was less than 10% chance. What does the future look like? Well, this is what we presume is inevitable based on the warming that's happened already. Well, we expect a little bit more sea level rise. There's quite a range there, and that's due to uncertainty in feedback loops, albedo effect, and this sea level rise due to glacial melt. But we do expect a 10% increase in UK heavy rainfall events by 2050, and actually every other year, potentially to have a heat wave as in 2018. Now, I can't quite remember the heat wave in 2018. It doesn't seem that big a thing, but it's actually only just a few days. But it didn't really hit the news, but there's a public health article I found on this a couple of days ago that said 850 people died as a result of that heat wave in England. So maybe with Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, that's probably just over 900. And it tends to be vulnerable people over the age of 65. But again, it's not something reported. But what we're finding is every other year by 2050. What could happen at the end of the century with a very severe target climate change scenario is that we might be having that every year. These dates might seem far off, but it's important to recognize it. Well, for me, I'm slightly older than most of you held the cold maybe, but by 2050, I'll be 61. So I'll be nearing that 65 bracket. And then when we're looking at 2100, we'll all definitely be older pensioners then. So looking at people, planet, prosperity, there's an urgency for action now. And this is a good quote from Sir Bob Watson in The Guardian this year, saying, we need action now. We need a 50% reduction in emissions by 2030. And we need to focus on short-term actions, not just long-term targets. And I think that's something quite guilty as a society, is to set a far off target, but not doing the action today. And we see that at a government level. We set a strong world-leading target, but we don't see action today or tomorrow. As I touched on, according to the actuary tables, a student leaving a UK university this year can expect to live for at least another 60 years. And as a result, we're going to be experiencing these changes in climate and their effects, in our personal lives. So there's a question as well to ponder, and maybe go back to your institutions and say, how has our educational experience prepared us for the challenges that we will encounter in our professional, but also our personal lives? But where there's a real crisis, there is also hope. There's a real nice frame, I can't remember where it came from, but they're saying if you're not concerned about climate change, then you don't understand the data. But if you have no hope, then you don't understand humanity in a way. We've overcome so much historically that we can take hope from that. Looking ahead to this year, we have COP26 happening in Glasgow, fingers crossed. And this is a real opportunity to get back on track. Will our global leaders take it? The UN Sustainable Development Goals have been a really good tool for not just typical actors historically, but more businesses, institutions, interested people to engage with these topics. And we see this happening, strategic plans aligning to the SDG goals. But we've also got to be wary that some of the engagement can be really superficial. But I really like this diagram as well, because I think it really aligns as well with Enactus's work around, people, planet, prosperity. But maybe reframing a little bit, planet, people, prosperity this way. They're all nested within each other. Can our universities step up and provide the place-based leadership that we need? We've seen it in part through COVID, but can they be an inspiration to the businesses and communities around them in leading sustainability initiatives? And can they be support by providing expertise to people as well? And I find this really, come from a student union background, I get a lot of hope here. An engaged younger generation has already made a big difference. And will we go further? So I thought it might be useful in terms of Enactus work or other campaigns you'll be looking at to kind of try a bit of an understanding where business missions come from. I'm going to do this through a case study of Scottish universities. As a quick summary of why I've chosen this is because in Scotland, each public body has a mandate since 2015-16 or a requirement that they have to submit their carbon emissions data to Scottish Government every year. And that's not the case for the rest of the UK. As a result, we have a really good sector, we're better quality reporting than the rest of the UK as a sector, and we can able to identify key trends, opportunities, and challenges. So I'll just go through this a little bit. So this is hot off, well, not even off the press, so this will hopefully get launched next week. But this is the latest data. It's always a year behind. But the figures to see are that out of the 19 institutions in Scotland, universities, they emit about 340,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. And compared to the year before, there's only been a 1% reduction. But there is a caveat to this data in that this isn't necessarily like for like, it's absolute reduction. So this last year, actually, St Andrews in particular really expanded what they report. And that skewed the data. So if it was a like for like, we would have actually seen a 17% reduction on the previous year. Half of this reporting year was during COVID. So a lot of that came from not flying for business travel. So we see a big reduction. So where do these emissions for businesses or universities come from? So in terms of reporting, they're divided into what we call scopes. There's 3 scopes. Scope 1 is on-site fuel combustion. So for example, that's from heating your boilers, it's from fleet vehicles, that's topping up with petrol, diesel for your security vans, for example, on campuses. It's also what we call F gases, or losses from refrigeration and air conditioning units. And it's also land use change, but that's probably only applicable to agricultural colleges. We then have what we call indirect energy emissions. And that's from purchased heat, electricity, heat and steam. So those are from fossil fuels that are combusted off-site, brought in and used as energy on-site. And then we have what we class as scope 3 indirect emissions, and that's everything else basically. So that's travel, it's water supply, treatment, waste disposal, and it's also procurement. So thinking again to Enactus projects, and you might be developing goods and services for other businesses or communities to use or individuals. This is where your emissions footprint will show up. Some of the key trends we can see in this is that scope 2 emissions have reduced massively over the last 5 years. I would like to say this is mostly due to the work of universities, but this is actually decarbonisation of the national grid. So we're seeing coal-fired power plants coming offline and installation of a lot more renewable energy. This is a huge change. You don't see this in many other economies. So offshore wind in particular is being really useful. And this has driven this reduction over time, but there's also some institutions making energy efficiency savings, for example, installing LED lights. So maybe 80 to 90% has been from the grid, and 10 to 20% has been from institutions installing energy saving devices. We see from scope 1 emissions that they've pretty much stayed stable. So this is a huge issue. So if you want to help tackle sustainability issues and getting businesses greener, heating is a really good project to look at. Alternatively, scope 3, we've seen that increase, but that's due to reporting. So if you can look at procurement, that's another big win. I'm just going to drill that down. So on the right, we have the number of institutions reporting different emission sources and their percent of emissions. The supply chain is one I want to focus on because St Andrews was the only one that reported. So that 5% is just one institution. Yet their emissions were 10% of the entire sector's reported emissions. So the goods and services we buy are huge. So if you can develop a service or a product and able to calculate the carbon footprint of that, that is such a powerful communication tool and will give you such a competitive advantage, because procurement teams, not just in institutions, but everywhere, are crying out for that granular data. The other thing I want to focus on was this waste and recycling, because I find historically and still that in wider society, but also particularly in student bodies, we tend to focus a lot of student campaign and efforts and energy in trying to improve waste and recycling on our campuses. But when we look at the data, it actually contributes to less than 1% of our emissions. So what's, single-use plastics is a real issue. Don't let this be blinded into another, take a distraction away from this other huge issue as well. So they are part of it, but you can make bigger impacts elsewhere potentially. So I'm going to stop there and I'll hand over to Katie to look at the role of student leaders in this area.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think it's really important to say at this point as well that although there's been a lot of specific legislation and amazing progress being done on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, we can't forget about the wider aspects of sustainability. And of course, alongside reducing those greenhouse gas emissions, these type of areas are really where student projects excel and help tackle these wider issues. So things like looking at period poverty, health and well-being, plant-based diets, obviously they're all integrated, they all feed into one another. And actually these are some of the aspects that you can develop projects on. So if we just go to the next slide. We wanted to really highlight that, I'm going to keep repeating myself, but we wanted to highlight that there is a lot that you can do as students. And there's a lot that you can do in both your everyday actions that you do, but also for your university and kind of creating that much bigger societal change. Think about the university that you're attending. Who are your student officers? What about your colleagues? What about your student union? What are they doing? How can you help feed into that? And understanding the climate and ecological crisis and sustainability within student governance structures and the wider student body is essential to helping create that change at your institution. There are lots of amazing resources out there. I highly recommend that you have a look at them because they can help guide you in different directions and help you create your own ideas on what you can do and the change that you can create. I won't go into detail on them now, but do have a look at them because they are all online. But if we just move on, what we thought would be really inspirational is to help emphasize even further that impact by showcasing some of the amazing projects that are being done by students who've entered the Green Gown Awards. And we thought we would start off by showcasing our 2020 student champion winners, who are Charlotte Evans and Millicent Sutton. So just to kind of in a nutshell tell you what they did, they're based at University of St Andrews, and they actually created and initiated and implemented a sustainability module, which is actually now compulsory for all 11,000 students who are enrolled there. That's amazing work. It's really impressive. This module completely inspires and engages environmental and sustainable action, both globally and locally. And it's really ensuring that students from all backgrounds, all academic interests are well equipped to driving that sustainability change going forward and making sure that it comes with them through their careers. We also thought we would showcase a few other projects as well, which have been really fantastic. And these pictures just kind of give you a taste of what's happening. So just to mention a few, the picture in the middle at the top there is from students at De Montfort University. They actually developed a novel biodegradable enzyme for textile dyes, which is really, really impressive, completely beyond my capabilities, but impressive that they've been able to do that. The London School of Economics really wanted to reduce their single-use plastics, and they actually did this by taxing bottled water sales. And then what they did is they used the money that they raised from that tax to actually go back into student-led research and behavior change campaigns to help encourage more sustainable action throughout their university. At the bottom, you can see there's a picture from Durham University. Students really wanted to reduce waste at their university, and they're very much focused on students who had graduated and were leaving university and kind of transitioning into kind of a more working life. And they worked with those students and they developed a campaign so that students would actually recycle and not waste a lot of their kind of material that they had at university, and actually support their local charity shops. So kind of taking those books and that into a charity shop so that it could be reused. Just a couple more to mention, because they're all really awesome, I'm sure you agree. University of Sheffield, they actually campaigned to change the university's electricity contractor, which is really brilliant. And they now have a fully renewable contractor, and it's actually saving the university 17,000 tons of CO2 equivalent each year, which is awesome. And then Angela Ruskin University has taken a more artistic approach, and they developed a project where they actually used art to develop solutions to some of these complex sustainable issues that we've been talking about, just showing that actually it doesn't matter what kind of academic interest you have, what background, you can bring it all together to help kind of come up with these solutions to make that change. So hopefully that has helped inspire you to start thinking about what you could do at your own university. So what I want to talk about now is I just want to move on to the Climate Commission's Climate Action Toolkit for the higher education sector. Now, some of you might have heard of this before, but I'm just going to briefly go over what it is and what we've been trying to do at the Climate Commission when we're working with the HE and FE sector. So just on to, brilliant. So just to give you an idea of the aims, the whole point of this toolkit is to help HE institutions achieve net zero emissions. So as I mentioned earlier, there's 3 main targets, but the overall target is to make sure that universities and colleges are producing net zero greenhouse gas emissions by no later than 2050. And that actually covers all 3 scopes that Matt has just gone over. And it does this by supporting HE institutions in developing their own journey to advance their own sustainability, but it also signposts resources and it gives examples of best practice. And it's really important that universities and colleges know that they're not on their own, that other universities are also going through this process. So actually showcasing different examples and different projects that universities are doing is really, really useful. So it supports institutions in a number of ways. It helps prepare students and staff for a changing world. We are in a changing world. We need to address these issues and we need to make change to be able to make sure that we come up with those solutions. It helps to aim protect biodiversity, work towards climate and social justice, and of course it aims to lower and eliminate that scope 1, 2 and 3 greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the core toolkit is focused on 5 aims, and I'm just going to quickly go over each aim. So when you look at the toolkit, and please do, it's all available online. You can have a look through and you can start actually to pick out bits that maybe you could help your university kind of focus on and start with their journey. But within the 5 aims, it actually gives suggested recommendations on what the university can do, and it also highlights those resources. So you've got leadership and governance. So a good example is one of the recommendations is for governors and the SMT to speak out against the climate crisis. The next is all about campus management, and this focuses on lots of different areas that you get within a campus. So things like energy, carbon, transport, food procurement. That's one of my my specialities. You know, looking at your food procurement, where are you getting it? Is it coming from sustainable sources? How can you increase the sustainability? Are you using things like plant-based foods within your catering? And as well as other things like buildings and biodiversity. It then focuses on research and knowledge exchange. Once again, there's a recommendation down there about reviewing your research processes to identify opportunities for minimizing carbon emissions in research activities. Another one on teaching, about embedding sustainability and climate justice in the curriculum for all students, and not just having it as an optional module, but making it compulsory and making sure that all students have access to this information. And of course, community engagement is the last theme as well. So one of the suggested recommendations is working with local organisations and industry to support climate, social and racial justice. So hopefully that's given you a really lovely introduction into the HE Climate Action Toolkit. And as I've said, please do have a look at it. So what we want to do now is we want you guys to have a chance to have a chat with each other and really think about what we've been talking about, and think about yourself, your university, and the changes that you can make. You know, maybe all this inspiration has helped you create some brilliant project that actually you can take forward. So what we're going to do now is Matt's going to put us out into breakout rooms, and we want to discuss a few different areas. So some of the main questions we have is, firstly, what are the opportunities and challenges for engaging with your institution on sustainability issues? What areas of sustainability would you most like to focus on? Maybe you've already been focusing on, maybe you can share with the other students what you've been doing. Are there any additional tools, resources or data you need to help you? What do you need? And also sharing ideas for your Enactus work and personal experience with sustainability. We'll be having these discussions and doing some word clouds as well, so it'll be really interactive.
Okay, hopefully we're all back. I always feel like when we come back, I feel like it should be like some TARDIS shaking in the background. We go lost in the ether.
Yeah, just when you're in mid-sentence as well.
Yeah, that's it. No. Well, it's great to hear the discussions. We've kind of got 5 minutes, so I don't know if we'll be able to do too much of a wrap up, but if I hand over to Katie, if you want to do a quick summary of some of the discussions or key points that you thought came out of your breakout.
Yeah, definitely. We had lots of really interesting discussions in our group. You know, we started off about, you know, well, what ways do you feel you can engage with institutions on sustainability issues, and lots of really thoughtful kind of ideas came about, you know, just trying to understand who we can talk to and being able to take that forward. And it can be quite difficult. We noticed a lot of the challenges actually throughout this, and I'm kind of biased towards that because we ended on the barriers, you know, and it can be difficult, like that lack of communication and sometimes feeling that people don't really care, or, you know, there's too many barriers in the way to get people to change their behavior. And, you know, just sometimes very, very difficult to kind of start these initiatives. But actually we talked about, you know, what areas we want to focus on, and it's really inspiring. You know, there's a lot of great ideas. We talked a lot about coffee cups. You know, it's not that difficult to have a reusable coffee cup, but there's so many challenges to it. But actually this is something that maybe we can implement and take forward at our organization, or starting a big campaign where you switch the lights off. So actually we had lots of fantastic discussions about, you know, we know which directions we want to go, and yes, there's barriers, but actually, you know, I'm hopeful, as I'm sure the whole team were, that actually we can overcome those barriers.
That sounds really good, Katie. Thank you. I'll pass over to Amy, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we had some great discussions in our group as well, and it was great to see that the students that we had in some of our breakout rooms as well were from some of the institutions where you showcase some great projects too. So we've definitely got some plans to connect with some of them as well, and potentially get them into the Enactus team. So that's always good to hear. But some really good ideas around how we can engage with institutions, around being involved in decision making, review current operations, raising awareness, green inclined vendors, providing alternative suppliers. So some really good conversations around that. And then in terms of then what kind of opportunities to work on, it was great to see almost a little bit of an ideation session around how Enactus projects can be developed around some of these ideas as well. So we were talking a lot about reducing tech waste, which is fantastic timing. It's like Tara knew that we are launching a engineering challenge waste project challenge next week with one of our partners. So that really fit in, thinking about how we're looking at alternative agriculture, using green allotments, green fertilizer, food sustainability, and then also things around heating and ventilation costs. So energy insecurity is a big kind of challenge around those that are vulnerable, and that was a great thing that our students in the group brought up as well. And then in terms of barriers, as Katie says, I think because we ended on that kind of seems to be a little bit of a lasting note, but it was good that we could overcome some of those in the session as well. So we talked a lot about access to data, and to support proposal. So it was great that you were able to share some of that information for us, because I know that we were able, all of us were able to take some of those statistics away to then use further down the line. Thinking about knowing who to talk to. And again, we kind of overcame that barrier by thinking about how we're using the EAUC connections within Enactus, and could this be an opportunity for us to connect further within EAUC and the Enactus programme to really get that sustainability advisor role moving. And then thinking about also the costs involved, what it could look like. And I think the key to all of this is really just starting small, isn't it? And then growing and scaling out. Like, one of our favorite sayings in Enactus is always around don't boil the ocean. Like, focus on the one and then work your way up and make it scalable. And then you'll end up having a really great kind of incentive and project around that. So yeah, some really cool discussions within our group.
Fantastic, thanks. I really like that. Don't boil the ocean. I'm going to steal that one. That's very good.
Please do. We say it a lot.
That's really good. Yeah, I think from our group, lots of the same. And something that really came out in terms of opportunity of engagement is the power of student unions and associations. And coming from a student union background, I can't undersell that enough. I would say, yeah, from my experience at Stirling Students' Union, we got the union to be net zero, and it's the only net zero students union in the UK, but it's also the second least funded students union in Scotland. But a lot of it just takes help from students. So from my experience was, I could only do anything if a student asked me. So I would do out a survey, and lots of the requests were really good, but I was like, that's not really feasible if it's with the university, and I know that's not their priorities. But, you know, 2 people put divestment. I could run with that, and we got the university to divest. You know, one person said, really good if we could set a net zero, carbon target. I was like, fantastic. I can go to my CEO of the student union and say, I think we can do one better. We can be net zero. So putting in that survey response really empowers students' unions. So that was really good to see. So do build on that as well. And yes, just remember what Amy was saying, do use EAUC as kind of a contact hub. You know, as I say, in my group, we get university staff asking for contacts from university or colleges just 5 miles away from them, because they're not that well connected, and we go, yep, no problem, here you go. So do make use of us. I'm just going to finish. We've got just on the half-hour mark, so we're due to be finishing up, but we're making good time. So, but I just thought, just looking at further opportunities, just saying, you know, EAUC, if you're in Scotland, every institution's a member up here because we're funded by the Scottish Funding Council, so do get in touch. SOS UK was previously the environmental wing of NUS, but they're set up as an independent charity now. I really recommend looking at their programs. Again, looking at the student union aspect, seeing if your student union isn't already part of the Green Impact program. I think there are about 80 across the UK that are. Ask them to do it. It's fantastic. It's really about getting student engagement, embedding sustainability in your students' union. And over time, you really see staff build up their capacity and understanding of sustainability and really champion it. So Stirling, we've done that since 2012, and you really notice the difference. And it's only about £250 for a year. So really easy to get involved in. Scotland again, but really worth a follow on Instagram if you're out of Scotland, is the 2050 Climate Group. So this is for people aged 18 to 35, and it's about developing leadership skills. Climate Talk is a sort of a youth forum that looks about demystifying and changing language around climate policy. So when we talk about the Paris Agreement, when we talk about COP26, what are those entities? I use it as a good website because it keeps me fresh, understanding what all the acronyms are. So just worth having a Google of them. Oikos International, which I always think is a Greek yogurt, but it's a good network of set up in Switzerland, I think, and it's a network of students who look at developing leadership skills and focusing on sustainability issues. We've got the Climate Psychology Alliance. I really recommend that. Climate anxiety is a real thing, and it's increasing, particularly in younger people. And it's recognizing, actually, you know, there is going to be a sense of loss, there's a sense of hopelessness sometimes. You can experience all these emotions. So it's worth identifying that when you're looking at different projects, just having an understanding of that, and also recognizing sometimes you'll have a great idea, you do everything, but it just might not fly, and being okay. You know, you won't win everything. I certainly didn't in my experience, but, you know, pick yourself back up and keep going. So look after yourself. And then finally, we have the People and Planet as well, which is quite well known for the divestment campaigns. There's lots of different networks that you can tap into. In terms of the Climate Commission next steps, we'll be developing a COI 16 statement. So this is the Conference of Youth, and it happens just before COP26, and it's the official route for youth engagement at COP26. So we're currently drafting a statement, which we're then going to develop with student input through workshops through July and August. So working with Amy and Enactus to get those out shortly. So do get involved, because it's a really good way for your voice to be captured. Working with the 2 UK delegates, which will be going to Milan to present these, so do get involved. So just to say a massive thank you for taking part today on behalf of myself and Katie. So, check out EAUC, the website, and also Climate Commission for further details. And just don't be a stranger, always here to help. So thank you very much.
Super. Thanks so much, Matt. That was brilliant. A really great session from both yourself and Katie. So thank you both for taking the time, and thank you all students for being here as well today. Please do not forget to join us at the Project Impact Masterclass later on this afternoon. What time are we on, Claire? What time does it kick off?
It kicks off at 2 o'clock. I'm very excited to see you back then.
Okay, super. You've got 25 minutes. Go get yourself refreshed, go walk around the block or something, get some fresh air, and come back revived and ready for what's going to be a fantastic session. See you all later on. Have fun. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
See you, bye.
Thank you. Bye.